What's up, duelists? And also, particularly, what's up to the new subscribers that joined in the last couple of days? Got about 60, 70 new subscribers in the last couple of days. I guess people really liked the Valhalla video. That video definitely popped quite a bit in the last few days. So, shout out to all the new viewers. Thank you for tuning in, etc., etc. That video was super tight. I do want to add an addendum. Apparently, if you do draw a card in the damage step with Air Knight Parshath or Neo Parshath, and you have Tethius in play also, you will actually trigger Tethius in Edison format. I got that ruling wrong in the video yesterday, or 2 days ago, I think now. But yes, that is actually a little bit of a correction. Makes the deck a lot better, surprisingly. So rare instance in which you find out an Edison format ruling and it makes things better instead of worse. But pretty based, can't lie, pretty based. All right, today's video, we're gonna be looking at Jarel Winston's top 8 Lightsworn Monarch deck. And we're going to be making some tweaks to it. We're going to be playing it. I've got a couple of replays with an updated list. But first, I like to walk you through my deck building process a little bit. When looking at decks from back then, what a lot of people did is they just shoved a bunch of cards that were generically good into a deck. And you can never really go super wrong with that. Nowadays, what we've learned with regards to deck building is game plans are much more, I don't want to say linear, but they're much more evolved. They're much more okay, this works better with my game plan than just main decking a random Gale. Or this strategy works better with my game plan rather than main decking Cyber Dragons, which aren't always going to be super amazing in your starting hand going first or whatever. You can really build a deck that leans into its game plan much harder nowadays because we have a little bit more, I don't want to say better understanding of deck building nowadays, but we see things through a different lens, right? We've had Yu-Gi-Oh for however many years, and playing stuff like 2 Solar Recharge, it's kind of sus. I'm gonna be honest. It's kind of strange. In hindsight, you wouldn't do this, That's just kind of it seems like a random inclusion when we're much more deliberate nowadays. So, taking what we can from this list. When you look at it, the general game plan looks like it is gain advantage from the Lightsworn monsters and gain advantage from your Monarchs. Both of these cards, not cards, but both of these types of cards are really strong at gaining card advantage and accumulating incremental pluses here and there. And then on top of that, you want to mill Dandelion or Treeborn Frog to get a little bit of value, and you want to resolve multiple Pot of Avarices, possibly even chaining them together in order to draw a whole bunch of cards and just overwhelm your opponent with card advantage. In the meantime, you also don't want to die, so that's why you have Gores. That's something to keep in mind when you're playing these sort of slower, grindier card advantage style decks. So we do have some trap cards here, keeping us from dying. We do have some, Book of Moons, etc., defensive cards that maybe a traditional Lightsworn deck wouldn't play because those types of decks are more all-in trying to resolve JD, that sort of stuff. Let's keep that game plan in mind and then take a look at the updates I've made to the list given what we know about Yu-Gi-Oh! In 2024. So first things first, I wanted to improve the incremental advantage that the Lightsworn monsters can get you. Jane can get you pluses by battle, which is really strong. Jane is just an incredible card in this format. Attacks over every Blackwing monster, attacks over every hero monster. It mills, so it gets you a little bit of increment in the end phase, and it just improves you up against Deck Dev, up against Glads. It runs over Hamster. It's just such a strong card in this format that I definitely wanted to leave the 2 that Jarel was working with. Lila, similarly, it's just an auto +1 Space Typhoon that mills 3. Can't go wrong with Lila. Gotta play the 2. I definitely am keeping the 3 Raikos because, flip Raiko, sack it for a Monarch is just the nuts in this format, apparently. But honestly, you could make an argument for going down to 2 Raikos if you wanted to fit something else, but it's kind of like the best starter that isn't everything else that's a starter, basically. It's the next best thing. And then I actually added more Lightsworns and a 3rd recharge. I think this goes along with the game plan of get advantage from your Lightsworn cards and activate Solar Recharge and then chain into Pot of Avarice and just have a really consistent draw engine that way. I added 2 Wolves and 1 Celestia. Celestia is kind of like your big nuke instead of Debris Dragon. I think it fits the game plan of the deck a little bit better to play Celestia instead of Debris Dragon. Most people nowadays aren't like super overcommittal to the board anyway, and Celestia also allows you to play the 3 copies of Solar Recharge, plus it's like a little mini win con on its own. While Celestia obviously doesn't completely nuke the board and get you 2 tokens like Debris Dragon does, Celestia also plays a little bit better under Royal Oppression, which is what you're going to be siding in the post-board games. So I think Celestia makes a little bit more sense in that slot. And in order to support Celestia, I think 2 Wolf is the right amount. You really don't want to be drawing this guy too often. We do end up drawing him in some of the replays, and that's just naturally going to happen. But I think 2 is kind of that perfect amount. We've also decided to include Charge of the Light Brigade and Foolish Burial, so really upping the Lightsworn engine because I think it fits the game plan of this deck quite heavily. Activating Charge of the Light Brigade now with 5 potential good mills, the 2 Dandelions, the Treeborn, and the Wolf, it becomes a much stronger card. Plus, with 3 Solar Recharge, we just want to make sure we have that Lightsworn name. 1 Foolish Burial can get us to the Wolves. It can also get us to Dandelion or Treeborn Frog. So I just think that having that extra bit of speed, it replaces the necessity of Cyber Dragon in the main, I think. So we've moved the Cyber Dragons to the side, specifically for going second or for the machine matchups. Cyber Dragon also doesn't play particularly well with Royal Oppression. Not that Wolf does all of the time, but you can mill Wolf in the damage step with Raikou, and that will get in under Royal Oppression. So there are ways in which Wolf can play under Royal Oppression, as opposed to Cyber Dragon, which can't really play that effectively under Royal Oppression. Hamster, Raikou, yeah, you got to keep these. I think that engine is pretty important. Got to keep the 5 Monarchs. I think Thestalos is the best complementary Monarch because, once again, these players these days, they just hold their good cards and they're like, I'm just gonna hold my good cards, and Thestalos really punishes that. They sandbag their Dark Arm, they sandbag their whatever. And the second your opponent sees Thestalos, they're like, oh shit, I gotta play more aggressively or else my hand's gonna get ripped apart by Thestalos. So I do think Thestalos is the best complementary for Caius and all of the Raikou, like Celestia, spot removal. I did keep the Card Trooper, despite it being a little underpowered without Debris Dragon. It is still really nice with 5 great mills, and it does trade very nicely into things like Neos Alias or Raikou. So I think just keeping him, he's like one of the best cards in the format. And he's one of the best enablers for 3 Pot of Avarice. I did keep the 2 Dandelion, despite, once again, not having what is the card called? I forget what it's called. Debris Dragon, there we go. Yeah, despite not having the Dandelion, I did keep, the Debris Dragon, I'm so cluttered today. My brain is, like, not working. I keep repeating words. I keep saying the wrong things. Guys, just bear with me, all right? Smash like if you've ever had a day where your brain just doesn't tie the knots correctly. Anyway, the Lightsworns, they mill Dandelion. It's 2 bodies for your Monarchs. It doesn't get much better than that. And then also going second into your opponent's Raikous, you can summon Dandelion and attack into it and just get free pluses that way. I think Dandelion is an insanely busted card. It also works really well with the Phoenix Wings, which I did elect to leave in this deck. I think Phoenix Wing Wind Blast with multiple copies of Pot of Avarice is one of the sickest engines that not a lot of decks fully utilize to the fullest extent, and I think that this deck does a great job of doing that. Triple Soul Recharge, already covered that. 1 Book of Moon, I don't think you really need the second in this deck. You're not particularly weak to things like Vanity's Fiend. Your deck is pretty normal summon reliant, actually, so you're not as weak to stuff like that. And I think between Book of Moon, 2 Bottomless, Torrential, and 2 Phoenix Wing Wind Blast, you have 6 summon stops for the Black Whirlwind matchup, and I think that that's plenty. I did cut the D-Prisons. I think D-Prison is quite... Once again, it's filler. It's kind of like the Book of Moon. It feels like filler in this style of deck. It feels like we could be leaning into the Pot of Avarice synergy a little bit more. We already have a boatload of spot removal between the Raikous and the Caiuses and the Celestia and all of our other trap cards. I don't think we really need even more spot removal. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And then what else did I change? I think that's pretty much it. I think we cut the random Gale, we cut the Sanguine, we cut the Debris Dragon. Sanguine without Debris Dragon doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Sanguine is good when it can search for a field nuke or a Gale, But when it can't search for those cards, then it's just kind of like, do I search for Dandelion? Like, there's no real reason for me to do that. So, yeah, I think cutting Sangan makes sense in this style of list. And then in the sideboard, I kept a lot of the things the same. I did keep the 1 Soul Exchange. I did cut some of the cards that I believe to be a little bit more situational, and I upped the amount of graveyard hate because the Frog Monarch matchup seems to be a pain, and the Zombie matchup is probably also a pain. So 3 DD Crow, 1 Soul Release, as opposed to just the 2 DD Crow that he had before. I kept the Legendary Jujutsu Masters. I added the Siders to the side and the Tragodia to the side. Tragodia wasn't even in his deck, but this card's crazy, so I have it mostly for the, I don't want to say mirror match, but against quick draw plants. Tragodia is very useful because it's a way you can deal with Titanial by battle. Not many cards can do that, and this deck is particularly weak to Titanial plus Dandy Token, so yeah, it's there for Amaryllis and quick draw. And then I'm not really sure about the Legendary Jujutsu Masters. I just kind of copied his sideboard and changed a few things. But in theory, they seem really strong versus both Blackwings and Hero. So, gotta have them for the aggro matchups. Let's hop into the replays. The first replay is up against Babohaft. And we win the rock, paper, scissors, which is great. Because whenever you're playing these hamster Caius decks, going first versus going second is like, it's like literally like drinking water or like being in the desert type meme. You know what I mean? We start off with Solar Recharge. Gonna happen more consistently with the full 3 copies. Pitch, Lila, draw 2, mill 2. No good mills, but you know what? That's fine. We got 2 monsters in the grave for our Avarice. We've got a starter. We got Phoenix Wing. We got Bottomless. I start off with just summon Lila, set Bottomless. You can make arguments for setting Phoenix Wing here instead of Bottomless. To play around specifically brain control, but if my opponent brain controls my Lila, am I really going to chain the Phoenix Wing and Phoenix Wing my own Lila? That sounds like insanity. I'm probably not going to do that. I'm probably just going to let him take the Lila. So set the Bottomless. I think this is safe. It's the safest into most things. Your opponent's more likely to have a normal summon that runs over Lila than they are to have a brain control or mind control on the first turn. They're just going to set a monster and pass back. We're going to draw Space Typhoon. A little bit superfluous with what we've got going on. I feel like just sacking for Caius is the best into a set monster. A set monster could be something like a Treeborn, or it could be something like a Dupe Frog or a Dandelion. And while sacking for Celestia, it's not like we'll get a better opportunity to do that. I'm considering now probably pitching the Celestia to the Windblast just to get the Avarice live. So that's kind of my plan here. And I think Caiusing the set monster is best, just in case it's a Goblin Zombie or a Sangan or a Dandelion or one of the millions of things that gets an effect when you destroy it. Attack for 24, and opponent has no Gores. So the reason I felt pretty confident attacking there is because they probably didn't set the back row that they have into the active Lila, but they probably do have back row. And they confirm that by setting 2 cards. We draw into another Phoenix Wing. Drawing 2 of these is not great, but we do have Avarice to support it, so it's not too bad. I'm going to blind Typhoon because fuck it. If he had Typhoon, he probably would have activated it on our back row first. Maybe not, but probably. And I'm just going to attack the set. If it's Raikou and he pops one of my cards, good. That puts me live on Avarice. So, can't complain. Turns out it's Blackwing Vayu, the Emblem of Honor. This is probably a very good matchup for our deck because our deck does the thing that their deck does, but we have better payoff. So, set the back row pass. He's going to summon Armageddonite, but the Armageddon and the Greffers into the Monarch deck are really silly. They just don't line up well. These don't line up well versus Lightsworn openers. They don't line up well versus Hamster. They don't line up well versus Wolf. And they definitely don't line up well versus the Monarchs. So these are functional card disadvantage from the opponent. Even though it's going to sort of replace itself, he's going -1/2 here because he lost the Vayu from his hand and he lost the Armageddon from his hand. So it's 2 cards for 1 Armed Wing, and the Armed Wing doesn't even get over the Caius, so we're kind of just crushing here. I draw Heavy Storm, a little bit of silly of a draw when we have 2 set back row, but maybe further down the line we can get a big Heavy Storm. Look at this setup here. We are now up 7 cards to our opponent's 4 or 5 on their draw step, so 7-5. But we've also got this Avarice coming. We've got Versatile Removal. We've got a big Sweeper. We've got another big Sweeper. It's just looking over for the opponent. We're also still at 8,000. So, yeah, once again, going first in the Hamster Raikou Caius matchups is pretty important. And the Lightsworn monsters, man, they're really good against these types of decks. Summoning Lila on the first turn of the game basically cold waved him for an entire turn, which is, that's a really strong effect, low key. Anyway, He does have Dark Arm Dragon, but this is like one of the worst Dark Arm Dragons imaginable. You pop Caius, okay, my Avarice is live. You pop any one of my back row, okay, they're both chainable. So, yeah, no, just worst Dark Arm Dragon imaginable. He's going to pop Caius. He honestly needed this Dark Arm Dragon to even be in the game, and even then, he's like still significantly behind. He's going to summon the Armed Wing, and here I will go for the Phoenix Wing, pitching the Celestia. I think it's pretty unlikely that the Celestia will become live, and I do want a Phoenix Wing now, kind of bait him into setting more back row into my Heavy Storm, so that on my next turn, I can have the sort of a natural play of Heavy Storm, then Avarice, then set Wind Blast, and I think that that sequence is the most natural. So I do want to pitch the Celestia because it's the least natural flowing card in my hand, basically. But yeah, you can make arguments for pitching the second Wing Blast and saving the Celestia. It's all marginal, but I do think that the most natural is like Heavy Storming the opponent if he sets more, or even if he doesn't, and then yeah, going for the next sort of thing there. It's also nice putting back the Armed Wing to the extra deck because that means further Vayu won't be able to banish. Opponent sets some cards, passes back to us. I can just Heavy Storm, then Avarice, and once again, getting 2+1s immediately upon switching back to my turn, which feels very nice. We draw into Raikou, and we draw into Celestia, so we do redraw that Celestia. A little bit annoying, because I would have liked to summon this turn, but we have the advantage. Let's not punt it. This is kind of a situation in the game where I feel like a lot of players would get too aggressive with things, they get too antsy, and they just commit everything to the board. How do we lose from this point? Well, from this point, how we lose is we draw multiple Avarice and Monarchs off the top without being able to summon them. So the worst thing we could do right now is throw away our only piece of tribute fodder. Raikou's actually our highest value card in this hand. As strange as that may seem, it is the best card in our hand right now because it turns on the highest potential of our payoffs off the top. We don't want to throw away this Raikou quite yet. We actually want to hold on to it. We don't want to set it into a potential Raikou from the opponent, a potential Caius from the opponent. What we want to do is we want to just set our only chainable back row and pass. Once again, we're not under any pressure. Opponent has no graveyard development. They have no hand. They have no attacking threats. So me setting this card and passing, this is going to favor us. The long game is going to favor us. As long as we can get tribute fodder and guarantee that we don't brick in a situation where we're getting aggroed out by a Caius, then we're winning, more or less. Anyway, opponent sets monster, passes back to us. We draw Treeborn Frog. That's going to be an excellent pitch to our Phoenix Wing Wind Blast, so no real reason to even commit the Treeborn Frog to beta Raikou. Opponent's going to set a back row. We're going to draw into Foolish Burial, and this is exactly why I like the Foolish Celestia play and the Foolish Celestia stuff in the deck as opposed to the Cyber Dragons. Draw phase, I'm going to Phoenix Wing, target the back row, put that card back on top, bring out the Treeborn Frog, Foolish Wolf, sack for Celestia, pop both his monsters, mill 4 cards. Now, it does suck that we did mill 4 monsters, all of these would have been great draws for us, but at the same time, if you think about the game at this point, at this stage, we pop both his monsters, right? If you think about the game at this stage, how does he win? Like, how does Vayu Turbo win? Once Dark Arm Dragon is gone, if you're at 8,000, it's low-key really hard for them to ever win the game. Like, this is kind of just like, I want to go on the record and say that I think Vayu Turbo has one of the worst late games of any deck in Edison format. I know people disagree with this, but outside of Dark Arm Dragon and like Burial from the Different Dimension, you don't really have that like late game, oh, this card is insane, this card is so good for me. But where Vayu Turbo really excels is in like if you can get that in early initiative in the first few turns and then press that advantage with like a follow-up Caius or a follow-up Brain Controller or a follow-up Dark Armed and get like a sort of a 2-turn punch or an OTK in the early mid game, I would say, is where Vayu Turbo really shines. But if it gets to this point and the Dark Arm Dragon has been milled or it's been dealt with and you have a high enough life total, it's pretty much impossible for Vayu Turbo to ever come back. Anyway, we attack for 23, set the Raikou, set the Mirror Force. Oh, no, we don't set the Raikou, sorry. We set the Mirror Force, that's what I meant to say. Set the Mirror Force and pass. So we brought back the Treeborn just because I knew I was going to set the Mirror Force and I wanted to have a follow-up guy in case of, what is that? In case I drew a Monarch, basically. Anyway, we draw into Torrential Tribute, kind of awkward, a lot of reactive draws being found here, but Torrential's Tribute is still a really strong card. We're going to go ahead and set Raikou and pass the turn. Now, this is an awkward line. I could have attacked with Celestia. If it's Deep Prison or Mirror Force, then he has to use it. And if it's not Deep Prison or Mirror Force, then he has to use the Necrogardna. I figured it'd be better to set the Raikou and pass in case he draws like another brick. He didn't summon a monster last turn. So if he doesn't draw a monster he can summon, then it's possible we want to go flip Raikou, target his back row on the next turn, and we get to clear something like a Mirror Force or a Deep Prison for free. But he does draw a monster that he can summon. He sets it, and I draw into Wolf. And so we got to show off a little bit the strength of the Wolf plus Celestia, and now we're getting to show off the weakness of the Wolf Celestia. That being said, if we do find a Solar Recharge, I do believe we have one Solar Recharge left. We can convert it. It's just a little unlikely. But yes, drawing Wolf is definitely bad. It's a couple of bad top decks here, the Torrential and the Wolf when you're already ahead. Kind of pseudo card disadvantage if you think about it. That being said, we can just Raikou, pop the monster, mill 3, attack with both. Unfortunately, milling a Caius would have been a great draw, but we still do have 2 Pot of Avarices. We still do have a lot of gas left in the tank. And he's going to flip that Mirror Force. So now he's got, he's got a Vayu in the grave. He's got Necro Plague in the grave. He's got some stuff going for him. But we still do have Mirror Force and Torrential, so we still have time. He's going to charge a Light Brigade and get a pretty insane mill. He's going to mill Vayu plus Elfin. Playing Elfin is a pretty strong card for this type of deck because it helps you deal with stuff like Caius and Stardust Dragon, which can normally give Vayu Turbo a lot of trouble. I think Elfin is one of the better inclusions that I don't see a lot of people playing. Anyway, he charges for Raikou. He summons the Armor Master, and here I'm thinking, okay, if I let this connect, then he just sets the Raikou, because I could let this connect, right? And then I could set the Torrential on my turn. But then he just sets the Raikou, and I'm risking a 50-50 of it hitting my Mirror Force. While it is bad to Mirror Force this Armor Master because he has another Vayu, and he can go into Silverwind, I have Torrential to deal with that, hopefully, so I can switch the Treeborn to attack, poke the Raikou, force the Raikou's activation, set the Torrential, and if he goes into Silverwind, then we'll be completely fine because we have Torrential to pop the Silverwind. So I'm thinking that we Mirror Force here just to avoid that whole 50-50 situation with the Raikou and make a much more calculated play. Once again, we do have those 2 Avarice, so we're going to shotgun that bad boy before doing anything hasty. Shuffling back a lot of our strongest threats here, including that Celestia. Even a 2300 beater here is enough to close out the game. We draw into Celestia Caius. We're going to switch the Treeborn and attack. He is going to pop the Treeborn and mill 3. And here I make a calculated risk that he will normal summon or special summon another monster. I set Torrential Tribute. And my opponent does top deck Burial, I think. If I remember correctly. Yeah, he top decked Burial. So he's gotten his 2 late game cards, the Dark Armed Dragon and the Burial from the Different Dimension. But we are still up cards, and we are still up life points, most importantly here. So his plan here could be to Burial, return Vayu, and then he could go like Vayu plus Armed Wing into Armor Master, and then Vayu plus Armor Master into Silverwind. And then he could attack for 5,300 this turn. On our turn, we would bring back Treeborn. We'd sack it for Caius, banishing the Silverwind, dealing him 1,000. But then we wouldn't be able to get over the Armor Master. He'd still have Plague. He'd still have Necrogardna as well. But that also can get him punished by a couple of different things. I'm not really sure what. Putting 2 monsters into play can maybe get him punished by Brain Control. Specifically, has he seen Brain Control? Oh no, I guess I've milled Brain Control. Yeah, I don't know why he didn't do that. Anyway, he Burials. He puts back Vayu, Sirocco. Putting back Sirocco here means that you can go Vayu plus Sirocco into Armed Wing, and then you can stack for Plague and make an 8-star like Dark End main phase 2 in case I have Gores. So this plays around Gores a little bit. That being said, yeah, no, I averaged back the Gores. So he does know about the Gores. So this is like the best play to play around Gores, which I think is a little bit conservative, but not the worst play he could have made. So he's going to go ahead and Vayu and bring out the Armed Wing. That being said, I still don't hate him using the other Vayu now to put the Silverwind into play, but I can understand why he wouldn't want to do that with the active Treeborn Frog kind of looming. This does give him the best play into a potential Gores. He attacks for 2,300, and we don't have the Gores, so it looks a little bit awkward for him now. We're going to be able to bring back Treeborn, sack for Kaya's, target the Armed Wing, and he actually prematurely concedes, forgetting that he has Necrogardna to buy himself another turn. Now, had he used the Necrogardna to buy the extra turn, I'm not really sure exactly what he could have top decked. It possibly a 4-star monster could have worked for him there, because then he could go 4-star, stack for Plague, make Goyo, Vayu plus the Armor Master into Silverwind, and then Goyo steal the Caius, Silverwind attack directly. On our turn, we'd be able to bring back Treeborn, sack for Caius, Caius target the probably the Goyo Guardian, run over the defense position Caius, and then he's draw locked, but he does have the stronger monster in play, and it's on us to draw the removal spell there. So if he drew a 4-star monster after all of that, he could have been kind of winning. That being said, he would have had to draw specifically a 4-star monster. I think he had a couple left. I think he did have one Dark Grepher left, but hard to tell. Hard to tell. The game could have still gone either way, and we still had a good amount of solid stuff to draw as well, so there's that. Game 2, we do open up with Wolf, but we do have Recharge, so not that bad, because we can pitch it, of course. He's going to Rhoda for Dark Grepher, pitch Sirocco, and Vayu, I believe. Oh, vice versa. But yeah, and it just passes the turn back. And this is kind of what I was saying earlier. Because he made this play, it kind of tells me he has Dark Arm Dragon. He has no back row, so, like, let's be real. There's a Dark Armed. You don't summon the Armed Wing, which tells me you have Dark Armed, right? Yeah, basically. Anyway, we draw into Raikou, and I'm like, alright, well, I don't really want to play this guy into a potential Caius or a potential Dark Armed. So let's recharge Mill 2. We find Card Trooper, which is pretty nice. We Mill 3. That's going to play well into Dark Armed Dragon. We're going to attack over the Grepher for 200. And I believe I don't set anything. No, I set the Typhoon. So I want to bait his Typhoon or his Heavy Storm here. And I also want him... I don't know. If he has like Dust Shoot, I want to be able to hit it in the end phase. He has a Sirocco, and he's able to run over the Card Trooper. And this is a pretty good threat from him because... we need specifically Jane to run it over, or Wolf. We draw into Pot of Avarice, which is nice. And we can play the Pot of Avarice to shuffle back the Crow, as well as the other cards to potentially set us up for something quite nice here. We draw 2 cards, but unfortunately we miss on one of the 3 DD Crows that I had sided in, and the Soul Release, which I had sided in. So don't really get there on that instance. And we also don't mill anything off the recharge, which is a little bit unfortunate. Draw 2, mill 2. Instead, we don't draw the Crows, we mill them, which is pretty unlucky. And also, we have to go to... We don't go to 5 monsters here, we go to 4. So we can't even use this next Avarice, which is a little bit unfortunate. Drawing the Typhoon and the Heavy Storm when they're dead always feels bad, but you have to have them in this matchup because they do play back row. And then drawing multiple Raikous going second never really feels great. Drawing the Treeborn Frog here doesn't feel great either, but it's just, what can you do? We didn't draw into back row, we didn't draw into DD Crows, we didn't draw into anything that's super chainable. And I'm looking at this Mirror Force thinking, I'm probably going to side this out for Game 3. And I think I should have sided it out for Game 2 because if they have Raikou, Caius, Dark Arms, Mirror Force is bad. And they can also force the Mirror Force by just swinging with like little monsters like Armageddon Knights or Vayus or things that I don't really want to Mirror Force. So I think Mirror Force is like not looking ideal in this matchup. So I'm thinking about siding it out for Game 3. And that's a way I can sort of improve this type of situation and stop it from happening again. That and just going first. I decided to set a Raikou and take a gamble that he doesn't have Dark Armed, but it's very obvious that he does. He's going to special Dark Armed. He's going to pop the monster. Now he's in an awkward spot, or he would have been in an awkward spot where he needs to decide between banishing one of these 2 monsters and popping my back row and not doing that. But, I mean, he has everything necessary to put another Dark in his graveyard. He's going to special summon the Gil, attempt to make Stardust Dragon, and I just concede because I'm dead this turn no matter what. Like, he's going to pop the back row. he's going to be able to banish and summon Armed Wing. Armed Wing plus Stardust is 4,800, plus Dark Armed Dragon is 70 whatever 100, and then he can even save the Caius normal summon for lethal for main phase 2, and we can't win. So yeah, I'm fairly confident we're dead there on board, and there's no real comebacks, but I'm down to just go next. This game we also draw Wolf, so drawing Wolf 3 games in a row, pretty unlucky, and this hand is pretty bricky. But that being said, this is why we still play Dandelion, because Dandelion does turn on this hand. So Dandelion set Bottomless Pass, he wrote us for Greffer, Greffer pitch, send Elfin, and Vayu, attack the Dandy, we get 2 tokens. So this is kind of how we drew it up, but this game we have the Caius for the Dark Greffer, and we are able to shut him off from being able to use that Dark Armed Dragon, or potential Dark Armed Dragon. We're able to connect for 3,400, so massive pressure early from us. Dandelion just absolutely carrying its weight. One of the most powerful cards in this format, if not amongst the most powerful. Pass the turn back. Gores is a great insurance versus OTKs. Opponent just sets a monster and a background passes. We draw Caius. I decide, fuck it. You know, like I'm going to Caius his monster. If he has Torrential, I get owned, but at least it plays me closer to my Avarice. I'm going to sack for Caius, target the monster, and he's got that Torrential. So, yeah. We do have 3 monsters in our grave, but, you know, we're getting closer. We've got Bottomless to stop his first play, and then we've got Gores to stop his second play, and he's only got 4 cards. So, I'm feeling pretty good about this. He sets a monster, we draw into our Super Nimble, which is a great draw here. We can set that as well. If he has a Raikou, okay, that's 1 card closer to the Avarice. Like, once again, like if our guys get popped by Raikou, I mean, it just always favors the Avarice player. He's going to flip Hamster. He's going to grab his Raikou. He's going to attack. We're going to be able to grab our Raikou as well. And he's going to set a background pass. Now, I am 99% sure his back row is chainable. But he knows that I know his back row is chainable. So he might not set something chainable. That, and he has a guaranteed hit in Raikou. So if he sets another guaranteed hit, then that's 2 things I have to pick between when flipping my Raikou here. I do decide to flip the Raikou first before going for anything in case it is Dust Shoot. However, because if he, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but if it is Dust Shoot, he's forced to put back the Wolf, which is kind of funny, and then it gives us a higher chance of milling Wolf off the Raikou. Which I think it's marginally better to do this. Although it's possible I should probably have Solar Recharged before flipping the Raikou in case it is Dust Shoot. That being said, I'm going to target the back row. I think back row is harder for us to deal with. If it is something like Bottomless Trap Hole or Royal Oppression or something like that, I will be happy that I targeted it with Raikou as opposed to targeting his Raikou, which we can easily target with Celestia or a Monarch if we draw into one of those off of our Avarice. He's going to Chain Typhoon. All right, you know what? You got us, 1 for 1. We're going to mill 3, and now our Avarice is live with 6 monsters, which is actually perfect because he has 1 DD Crow for our Caius. He does thumb up on the Avarice activation, and then he asks me for the targets. Generally speaking, don't thumbs up when your opponent activates Avarice because that's like an indication that it is okay. In tournament, that can be considered like, oh, you affirmed that the Avarice was okay. So, either way, I do have to declare my targets before he can definitively say the card is okay to resolve. But earlier in the match, I believe he had thumbs up after me starting to type my targets. And so it's kind of like one of those things where it's like you're implying that it is okay. So just be careful how you thumbs up there in tournament. Obviously, in this game, I'm going to let him crow whatever. It doesn't fucking matter. He's going to crow one of the Caiuses, and I'm like, all right, I'll just Pot of Avarice all 5 back, shuffle, and draw 2. And we do rip into one of our mini Monarchs that will tear through this board. We also do have that Solar Recharge, Pitch Wolf, draw 2, mill 2, and we find Phoenix Wing Wind Blast. So we've got an Interrupt, we've got a Banish, we've got Pressure, opponent's at 3,900, we're still at 8,000, we've got Gores. And yeah, that's going to be all she wrote. Pot of Avarice. Jarel Winston definitely onto something with Pot of Avarice here. Caius going to banish the Raikou. Switch the Hamster. Want to put him as low as possible. Attack for 11. Set the Phoenix Wing. Good luck, have fun, basically. I mean, he has Vayu Elfin in the grave. So that's a start, right? That is something that can deal with our board. However, if he does that, he drops down to 1 dark. He doesn't have Dark Armed Dragon. So if he does have Dark Armed Dragon, he has to do it first. He'll go Dark Armed, priority target, probably the back row, right? Then we'll go Phoenix Wing, chain, possibly? Maybe we don't even do that. Maybe we don't even chain the Phoenix Wing. Maybe we keep all our cards. He goes Vayu Banish, Special Armor Master, Attack Attack. Maybe we do. Maybe we do chain the Wind Blast. I'm not sure if you would chain the Wind Blast here if he has Dark Armed for the third fucking game in a row. But thankfully for us, our opponent is not the luckiest man alive. He's only somewhat lucky. He's going to make Armor Master. He's going to attack Caius the Shadow Monarch. We're going to chain Phoenix, or not chain, but we're going to use Phoenix Wing Wind Blast. And he's going to be staring down lethal on board. He does have brain control, he does have bottomless, but none of these things react to stuff that's already happened. So, yeah. Gang shit. All right, next match. That was a good match. I think there was a lot of intricacies. You saw us play through both Dark Armed and Burial in game 1, which is something not a lot of decks can do in game 1 before they have all their counters for this deck. So pretty impressive stuff. I think this Lightsworn Monarch deck may have what it takes to compete with the top decks. I think this is like a really well-positioned deck, provided you have a good sideboard for the Frog matchup. I think that matchup might give you a little bit of a headache. But I think, speaking of like what's currently popular in Edison format right now, which is Black Wings, Vayu Turbo, Hero Beat, Zombies, Frogs, I think against those 5 decks, this deck probably just rolls them. Against decks like Dragon Turbo or like maybe Fairy. Well, Fairies this deck probably does okay against as well, because Phoenix Wing is so good versus Fairies. Yeah, I think this deck is just solid. I think it's just like outwardly solid. It's like kind of the epitome of an Edison format engine deck. All right, let's move into the next match. Next match is up against Quickos. Let's see how this deck can hang against some of the more aggressive OTK combos, because I think, or combo decks, I should say. I think it's pretty good against all of the like aggro and like Raikou Caius decks. Maybe a little bit weaker into the Drill Warrior strategies. Drill Warrior probably gives this deck a lot of trouble game 1. You do have those Royal Oppressions. You do have Phoenix Wing Wind Blasts, but if you don't find those specifically, I could see Drill Warrior being a problem. But, you know, outside of like specifically Quick Draw, which doesn't see as much play as it should, honestly. I think this deck lines up really well versus most of the meta. Plus, this deck probably does better into deck dev than Quick Draw does. Sets the Hamster, sets the Mirror Force. You know how it is. We could set Dandy Torrential, but I think doing that early is only good versus specifically Black Wings. I guess set Dandy Torrential is also pretty good against, like, I don't fucking know. Raikou Caius decks, if they have Raikou. But I'm thinking, like, on my turn, I can just flip Hamster, get Raikou, and then sack the Raikou for Celestia and pop everything. And then it's like, whoa, that's just so much better than setting Torrential Dandelion. I can always Torrential Dandelion later, is what I'm saying. Anyway, opponent just passes, which is like, all right, I get a free turn. Flip, Nimble Mega, grab Raikou, and now activate Charge. Hopefully mill something good. Nope, not quite. Grab Lila, Solar Recharge. Hopefully mill something good. Draw 2, mill 2. Oh my gosh, we hit the wolf. And this is why you play it, ladies and gentlemen. Even though we drew it in every single game we've showed so far, the 2 games where we've milled it, that power level is just too high. Getting a free wolf here is insane pressure. This is so busted. We get a hit for 3,200, and we have the main phase 2 Thestalos. So we're going to attack for 11, attack for 21. If he has Gores, which is what he's representing, let's take a look. He does not have Gores. He has a very powerful hand, though. I'll say it. He has a very powerful hand. But if he did, he could have summoned the Doomcow and attacked. I don't know why he didn't do that. I feel like that's kind of the point of Doomcow, is to summon it and attack and poke at openers. Interesting. I wonder why he didn't do that. I wonder why he didn't use the Doomcow to poke. It seems a little silly. Maybe he was holding it because it's his only fiend for the Dark Fusion. I could see that. Anyway, we connect for 3,200 here. We sacrifice for Thestalos, and we're going to hit the Doom Caliber. Yeah, I guess it makes sense he's holding it for the Dark Fusion. It's just a little bit underwhelming, I suppose. I would probably summon it and try to poke at the opener. Anyway, we're going to connect for another 400 damage there. And yeah, we're just in a crushing position. This is just like, we went first with Hamster, and we milled a Wolf, and this is all it takes to get this far ahead with this deck. Pass the turn back, he draws Trade-In. He's going to go Heavy Storm first. I don't love that from him. I think he should have probably gone for the Trade-In first. Because if he doesn't find Dark Calling, he's going to want to save that Heavy Storm. He goes Trade-In, he finds Phantom of Chaos, and he does find specifically Dark Calling. So he's going to be able to Dark Calling, special summon out Evil Hero Dark Gaia here, and he's going to attack into the set Raikou, dealing me 4,500 damage. He's going to set a monster and set a back row and pass the turn back. Now looking at his deck, he's got the Trade-Ins, he's got the Gaia Plate, and he's got the Doom Caliber. So I can kind of piece together his build based off of these 3 cards in tandem. If we hadn't seen the Doom Caliber, let's say we had seen something like Caius alongside Trade-In Gaia Plate, we might not know if he's on the Lightsworn list or not. But usually you don't see the Lightsworn list playing Doom Caliber Knight as well, because it's a little bit awkward to summon alongside a Lightsworn monster. So usually if you see Trade-In plus Doom Caliber plus Gaia Plate, you can piece together that it is the more OTK focused Demise Manju build. Which means that the set monster is one of 2 things. It's Morphing Jar, or it is Legendary Jujutsu Master. That being said, it doesn't really fucking matter because I have Celestia, so I'm just gonna sack for Celestia and pop both his cards, mill 4, brain control the Evil Hero Dark Gaia, and go next. Like, that's all it takes. That's all it takes, ladies and gentlemen. Celestia pop 2, going absolutely crazy in that game there. Now, we did get to go first. We did have a pretty insane start, and he had a pretty slow start. So game 2, maybe we can see some other stuff. I decided to side in the Royal Oppressions, and I think I sided in a couple other cards as well. We'll probably see them at some point this game. He's going to activate Trade-In and draw 2 new cards. I actually want to look at his hand because I want to explain a few things to deal with his build. He's going to activate Upstart Goblin next, drawing into Lightning Vortex. Lightning Vortex is something you side in when you anticipate Vanity's Fiend. So this card right here on the far right, Hand Destruction, I think is a terrible card. And you should never play it in this deck, ever. Mostly because it fixes your opponent's hand. Part of the strength of these OTK decks is when your opponent has even a slightly weaker hand, you can catch them slipping. You know what I mean? You can kind of be like, okay, your hand's a little weak. I can just summon a big Gaia and beat down, right? The issue with Hand Destruction is you pretty much guarantee your opponent will never have a bad hand. And if you line up your best hands with Evil Hero Dark Gaia, or your average hands with Evil Hero Dark Gaia, and you line that up against your opponent's always best hand, it is not worth it. On top of that, this card is literal card disadvantage. It is just not worth playing. Upstart Goblin, also not worth playing unless you're playing specifically Hidden Armories and Megamorph. If you are playing Hidden Armories and Megamorph, then it is worth playing. I don't know if my opponent's playing that, but I can make an educated guess that he's not. Simply because dealing 9,000 and dealing 8,000, like, there's very real life point threshold differences with this deck. And we'll get to that in a second. Anyway, he decides to activate Hand Destruction now. And now it's just, like, super awkward because, like, what do you discard? Do you discard both your 8s, anticipating, not seeing a Trade-In? Do you discard Doom Caliber Knight, anticipating playing around something? I think what he should have done was discard Doom Caliber Valkyrian, personally, save the Trunade, save the Vortex, save the Gaia Plate. But my opponent makes a mistake. He discards Valkyrian Trunade, and he keeps the Doom Caliber. The Doom Caliber is easily the weakest part of this hand. While it does improve Dark Fusion off the top, Dark Fusion is another heavy card disadvantage card, and playing that alongside Hand Destruction, I cannot say it's a good build. I have to say, if you are playing this card, don't. Cut it from your deck. Play better cards. There are infinitely better cards than Hand Destruction you can be playing in this deck. Anyway, he draws into Contract and Trade-In, so keeping a level 8 does pay off well for him. He's able to Trade-In into Phantom plus Allure, and now he can cast the Allure as well, banishing the Phantom as opposed to banishing the Doom Caliber or the Gores. Makes a little bit of sense. I maybe would have considered the Phantom, but I think that this makes the most sense because he does have the Dark Calling now. He's just going to normal summon Doom Caliber and pass, We have Cyber Dragon because we did side those in because we are going second. We're going to be able to attack with Jane. This is one of the cool parts about Jane is it can actually attack over Doom Caliber Knight because Jane doesn't start a chain when it gains attack. This is actually a continuous effect. So Doom Caliber Knight can't negate it. Going to get us an extra few points of damage here. He's going to take 200 and then we'll attack for 2100. If he has Gores, that does suck, but we do have Torrential. And we know that he's pitched his True Nade, so he specifically has to have Heavy Storm to deal with us now. He's going to special summon Gores, so we got owned, kind of. We're going to set our 2 cards and pass. And phase Mill 2. Hopefully hit a Dandelion, but missing on the mills. A little bit unfortunate there. I did side out a lot of my Raikos and Hamsters because they're not very good against Evil Hero Dark Gaia OTK. So this Gores is going to be kind of difficult for us to deal with unless we find a normal summon or the opponent normal summons. He's going to go ahead and fire this Lightning Vortex way too aggressively. No reason to do this. You can just run over both my monsters. They're weaker than your monsters. Yeah, pretty poor use of cards. He's going to switch the token to attack, and he could play around Torrential by not summoning further, but he decides to summon further, and that's going to be met with a Torrential Tribute. Now he does have Dark Calling, but we do have Bottomless, and the trap cards in this deck proving to be very, very useful versus these all-in OTK strategies. We draw into Gores, a little bit sus, but we just got to pass. Unfortunately, our Jane didn't mill a single monster. He's going to set a monster and pass back to us. Remember what we talked about in game 1. If he sets a monster, it's one of 2 things. It's Jujutsu Master or a Morphing Jar. That being said, I have to set my 2 back row. Because if it's Jujutsu Master, alright, we have infinite time. We can eventually find something to sack for this Caius. But if it's Morphing Jar, I can't really afford to not have the Royal Oppression in play. And I do want to make sure that my Avarice is live. He does have Morphing Jar, so pretty fucking insane top deck. I hate Morphing Jar. I'll just go on record and say that I hate it. He's going to draw 5 new cards. He's going to normal summon Manju. He's going to go ahead and search the Masked Beast. And once again, that Hand Destruction proving to be pretty fucking terrible. He's going to go ahead and Hand Destruction, pitching Lightning Vortex and Gaia Plate. We're going to pitch Thestalos and Solar Recharge, drawing into Book of Moon and Soul Release. I sided in the Soul Release in case he had a big turn and didn't find Dark Calling, or like he went first, big turn, passed without using the Dark Calling, and then we can Soul Release his monsters and kind of kill a Dark Calling. Anyway, he draws 2 more cards. More card disadvantage in card destruction. So a lot of card disadvantage here. He goes for the Heavy Storm before card destruction, but this is only good if he finds one of his Dark Callings, and he's already down one of them. And even if he finds a Dark Calling, he needs Megamorph. So he just needs too much, and he's activated so many hard -1s that it just doesn't add up right. Like, this is never going to actually be the case, you know? He's going to draw 2 new cards. He's going to draw into another Upstart. We're now at 10,000 life points. He still needs specifically Megamorph Dark Calling to do anything, but he's got triple Manju, and that just doesn't get you anywhere here. He's going to attack for 2,100. We're going to drop to 79, but yeah, a little bit unlucky for him. His, Dark Callings are in the bottom 11 cards of his deck, but I think, like, these cards are just bad. Like, you could just play more actionable, more live cards than these, like Demise, or like, just play better cards. Hidden Armory for DDR, that type of thing. Bring back your Banish guy. I don't fucking know. Anyway, we draw into Windblast, and now Heavy Storm and True Nade are both gone. Gonna be difficult for him to push past 2 spot removal back rows and all of our aggression alongside this average card advantage when he has no sweepers or no ways to play through the back row. He could still have Royal Decree, but we do have Monarchs and Lilas to pop the Royal Decree. We draw into Wolf Recharge, drawing Wolf in almost every single game, but at this point, can we really complain? We are just up super lots of cards, and we are up a lot of pressure. Run over the Morphing Jar in case he plays Book of Moon. Set, pass. He draws the Masked Beast, and he concedes and leaves the game. Yeah, I think had he been playing a more consistent build, this matchup would have been terrible. So I'm a little bit concerned about playing this deck into the OTK decks. I think the sideboard might need a little bit more for possibly these unfair matchups, possibly these Dragon Turbo, Evil Hero Dark Gaia style things. So if you do copy this list and you do want to bring it to a tournament, I think as it is, you're going to do great against the expected or the current expected meta in whatever it is, February 2024. But against some of the newer decks, some of the like more like fringe unfair decks like Amaryllis, Evil Hero Dark Gaia, the decks that I honestly think are tier 1 threats, but just don't have the representation to sort of, how do I say this, be worth committing a lot of main deck slots to. I think because those matchups are so bad, you might want to dedicate these Jujutsu slots to those matchups. I think something like Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer, or I don't even know, honestly, Threatening Roar maybe? Yeah, Threatening Roar could be really good for this deck. And then on top of that, I think having some cards that might overlap with the Frog matchup, like Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer, could be really useful as well. Possibly even Compulsory Evacuation Device, if you want to go that far. Or Trap Dust Shoot, which would be a good way to deal with some of the unfair strategies like Fish, or like some of those like weird like OTK. You know what I'm talking about. I think these Jujutsu Master slots and possibly even the Trigodia slot could be used better. And possibly even the Soul Exchange slot. Although, had I had it in Game 2 versus the Vayu Turbo player, it would have been pretty good. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments below about this deck and this strategy. I think it's really good. I think Jarel Winston knocked it out of the park with the original build. Given the limited circumstances and limited information that he was working with in 2010, I think he had a really sound idea and a really sound strategy. But I think we can perfect it even more given the knowledge we have about the game here in 2024. I'll see you guys in the next vid, and stay tuned for the RBET announcement tomorrow morning. Peace out.